Hello, hello, hello. Testing mic check 1 2. Are we live? Hello, hello, hello. Testing mic check 1 2. Are we live? Okay, seems we are live. Greetings, everyone. Hope you're doing great. Hope you're taking good care of yourselves. Welcome to this live stream. Now, this live stream has been recorded very many times because I have been experiencing some issues with power and internet. But I hope this goes smoothly. Today I'm going to be discussing Django views in detail. We've so far created some function-based views, and what we've been doing is simply creating functions that take in a request object and then render some sort of template in their response. So now we're going to be digging deep and studying more about views. So views are basically functions and classes that handle HTTP requests and return HTTP responses. If you're making a request to a server and you get a response back, that is a view in action. When you visit a page on your web application and try to maybe refresh, you are making a request to a server, but then it's the view that's handling what is being returned to you, which is the page you are actually referring to. Now, views can also be function based, just like the ones we've been creating, and they can also be class based, which are classes that then define how we handle requests and return responses. This right here is a very simple diagram I've created for the sole purpose of letting you guys understand how views work. So on the client side, which are your templates, you're always going to be making requests. When you click a link and go to another page, or when you, let's say, try to visit a certain page on the website, you are making a request to a server through a view. It is through the view that you can then query the database. When you query the database, that can be something like making a query and then getting back a result. So all that is done through the view. So you can also have situations in which you're, let's say, calling an API or using an LLM. When you're doing such a thing, you are still going to be doing it through the view, and then clients will be returning a response. So this is a very simple diagram to show it so that you can get the concept. Now, function-based views are basically the simplest ways to create views. You define a function that takes in an object of type django.http.http request and returns a response of HTTP response, which is in the same module. So when you define a function and it's going to be a view, the request object is going to be the first parameter you provide to that function, just like we've seen, and then whatever you'll be returning should be a response object. Then we can also get through the request object the HTTP methods, the request data, and so on and so forth. I'm going to be showing you how this works. Class-based views, on the other hand, are classes which can be defined with methods handling the HTTP verbs like get, post, put, patch, delete, and so on. We can also have other methods to handle other stuff on your view. For example, setting the template context, getting the query set, and so on. I'll be explaining how those work. Django also provides generic class-based views, which are used for handling requests. So these are inbuilt ways you can generate your CRUD app very fast without having to write a lot of code like how you would do in a normal function-based view. So yeah, let's get started. Now, right here in my VS Code, I have the simple app that we looked at yesterday. And I also I actually opened the app in my browser, but one thing you can note for now is our images are not showing up. And when you try to investigate, let's try to inspect. That will take us to the specific HTML, for that specific item. When you try to navigate to /media/default.png, we are told that our image could not be loaded. So what's happening here is Django is failing to load our media files in development. Lucky for us, there is a way Django can allow us to serve files that are uploaded to our media folder. If you've just been watching this video, or you've been following along with the series, we set up some settings inside our settings.py, and those were the media root and the media URL. So we discussed that the media root is the folder in which Django will be uploading our media, and it's the one on which this /media URL will serve those files that we're going to upload to our server. Now that can be on our local file system in this media folder, or it can also be on a storage bucket or something of that sort. So that's basically what those two settings do. What we need to do now is to go ahead and make sure that these are added onto the list of our URL patterns. So we need to make use of a function called the static function, and that's going to help us to make sure this media URL points to the folder that's holding our static or our media files. So I can't memorize most of the code, but what I can do most of the times is to always search for it. So I think I even opened it before. So if I say serving static files, or serving, actually that's serving static files in Django, that will lead us to the Django documentation, which I'll leave down in the description. And this Django documentation, Django simply describes how static files are served. I talked about static files in the templates video. You can check it out before you move further. But these are the different settings you set up. For example, we looked at the static URL that helps us to serve our static assets. I looked at how we can provide images and use the static tag by loading it. Now, the section we're interested in is one that talks about serving uploaded media. So here we have serving static files during development, but all you're interested in is serving media files that are uploaded by a user during development. So this is the code right here. All it does is to basically go ahead and import the settings object, and then import our static, and then it will go ahead and basically write this right here, which I'm going to explain. So what I'm going to do to simply copy paste this code right here in my core URLs, because that's where the root URLs of our project are. So I'm going to paste it down here and then explain what this does. So the first thing we are importing here is going to be the settings object. If you're wondering what that is, it is an object that is pointing to all the settings. So through that object, we can access every setting by just calling or accessing the name of that specific settings. For example, if you wanted to access the debug mode, we can just say debug settings.debug. That will point to the value of that constant debug that we set in our settings.py. We can also have settings dot, let's say, WSGI application, giving us the value to our WSGI application object, and so on. The next thing we have is the static function. So what this function does is to help us return a URL for serving files in debug mode. And one thing we can see here is it takes in the media URL, which we defined to be the /media URL, and then it also points to the document root, which is like the root folder in which we are supposed to look for all that media we are serving on that URL. And for that case, it is the settings.media URL. So what that will do is to just simply set up a URL on which our media files will be accessed when we are developing, and it will add it to our root project URLs. So I'll cut that and then paste it just after our list right here. So let me take it to a new line and then fix the syntax, because it's supposed to just be after the list of URLs. Then I'll also move our inputs to the top, and that will make our inputs be at the right place. So yeah, that's what we needed to set that up. So now that this is done, we are going to go ahead and save and restart our server. And yeah, our VS Code is running and our server is running. Let me close the camera right here. When you go to our product reviews website, we can refresh, and now we see that our media files are being accessed, which is really cool. So yeah, that has been the fix for that. Now let's go ahead and look at views. At this point in the live stream series, we have so far created some views that were responsible for returning some pages. For example, the home page. The home page basically renders a list of items, and it renders that in a template we called index.html. So it basically takes in the request object, renders a template, and then returns that in a context that we've defined as a dictionary right here. If we go back right here, what we have is exactly what is being defined right here. So function-based views in most cases are always going to be a function that takes in a request and returns a response. But we can also define class-based views that have each of the views we define as a simple method on that class. And let me show you how that is going to work. To create a view or a class-based view, you are always going to import the base class that represents all views. So every view we define in Django is going to be a child of the class Django.views.view. So this view class is the base class from which we create all class-based views. And if we are to recreate the home page view, we're then just going to come right here and create a class called homepage view. So the homepage view class will take in, or it will basically inherit from the view class, meaning that this is a view. And then for now we can pass. So let's also go ahead and modify the URLs for the products app, so that instead of using the home page, we then register this as a normal class-based view. So when you go to our urls.py in our products, instead of just providing the name of the view, we can point to the class homepage view and then call a specific method on a class or a view class, which is that .asView method. So what this does is to basically make this class-based view be seen as a function-based view. That's the most basic detail of it. When you check the documentation here, they say this is the main entry point to a request response process. So yeah. Now, once we've been able to do that, I will save. When you go back to our views, remember that our views need to process requests and return responses. Our function-based views are just functions like this, but when you define what's going to happen on a view, we do that through the methods, most especially if we're not using our generic views, which I'm going to talk about later. So what we shall do here is to define a function or a method called get. So this is going to be a method on this class called get. And one thing to note is that this will also take in a request object. So I'll say HTTP request. And once we've provided that, we can then go ahead and specify that this is going to return our response. So we can return render request, just like we had done in our homepage view function right here. So we can return our request, and then this is going to take in the template name, which we have called index.html. So I'm going to go back right here and say index.html. Once that is done, I'll then define a function. Actually, this is going to be, I'll provide a dictionary in here, and the dictionary is going to have the following values. So the first thing we shall provide here is going to be the title, and that is going to be the exact title we get from our page title. Now, since this is a class, we can define this as a variable and this variable can be an attribute on our class page title. So instead of accessing this title as something that's defined within the method, we can just point to self.title, meaning that every method we can define here can still be accessing this page title since it's global to that class. Now we can also provide our all right. So just like I was saying, we're going to define this method called get on our homepage view. So that's what is going to handle the HTTP method of get when we try to access the home page. So when you try to get the home page, of course, this will be the method to handle that specific request. And then we shall define all the values that we need for our context inside this dictionary that we're providing as a third argument to the render function. So that's what we are doing. So we provide the request right here, and then we provide the template name index.html, and right in our context is where we're going to provide our products. So what I'm going to do is to still copy this value products, this key of products, and provide it right here. So I'll create a variable called products. Now in this variable I'm going to call products. Of course we understand that this is a query that's coming from the database, so you can go ahead and write that within your method, and that will be the way to call or be in position to get the result for those data. Now I'll come right here and change that to what we've queried, and that will be our product list. So I'll run my formatter here to make things a little bit better. And yeah, that's going to be our function. Now I'm going to remove this method right here, which we defined as our home page. So for now, we have this view function right here. So this is how a normal class-based view is going to be. You have a class that inherits from some view class. For now, we are inheriting from the base view class, which is the parent of all view classes. We've defined a global name page title, and we're accessing it via self.page title, as well as our product list, which we are accessing right here. So you can also be in position to define that as a variable here and then substitute it in our context. So since we have been able to register this to our URLs, I'm going to save. And when I save this, I'll save our views. I'll then go back here. I will notice that everything still works, which means our view is working. Now, those are not the only methods we can define on our view function. In fact, we can go ahead and define a post method to handle post requests. So we can do def post, and then we can pass in self, since it's a method of the class, as well as our request object. So this is the same thing we are doing for our views right here, but we are doing it in terms of classes. So I'll do HTTP request, and then I'll pass it, since we do not have any request or post request for that specific class-based view. So that's how you define a class-based view. And class-based views are really amazing in the way they work, because they kind of make your code more organized, and you can get really creative if you have a basic understanding of object-oriented programming, which can make your code a little bit cleaner compared to when you write long function-based views. Now, the next thing I'm going to be discussing is going to be the generic views. So the generic views are basically views that Django provides for you out of the box to allow you be in position to do most of the basic stuff. For example, this page right here is a page on which we are listing stuff, and these are template pages, which are just basically returning a page instead of performing any other calculation. So Django has ways of handling all those situations. If you want to get access to those classes, they are found inside Django.views.generic. So we can import things like, let's first use the template view. So the template view is very easy. In fact, I have a snippet for that in Django. If I create a template view, I can simply use this right here. So basically, I can provide the class name. If I want to create, let's say, the about page as a class-based view, this will be a template view. And then in the template name, all I have to do is to just provide this name of the view that's returning that template. And that will be our about.html. If I have some stuff I want to add to the context, there are methods that are responsible. There's actually a method called getContextData. And what that does is to return the context dictionary. So if I want to get access to the context dictionary, it's what is being returned by this function by default. So this dictionary can then be updated with whatever I want to add there. So for example, we can say context, and then whatever I want to put there, for example, the page title or the title. And then we can describe what we want to add there as an attribute on the class. For example, we can say this is going to be our about page. And then we can place the about page title right here. So I can create a variable or an attribute on the class called page title, and that will be our about page. So I'll then go ahead and just provide the page title. So that will be our page.title. One thing we need to note is that after modifying our context, we then have to go ahead and return that modified context, just like I'm doing right here. So here we shall be in position to create the view, and then modify the context. And this is just basically less, or this is, it actually just depends on how much object-oriented programming you know. But what we've done here is to define a template. In case we did not have any context, we'll just be having something like that. And that will be exactly what we are doing right here. Though, since we are modifying the context, or since we're adding some variables to the context, just like we did this side, we then have to add the context via the get context data method. And there are very many other methods. In case you wanted to override the get method, you can simply describe a get request right here. So you see the function get, so that's the method, similar to what we did in the first example right here. So I'm going to modify both the about and the contact page, and then we shall move on with the video using class-based views only. So what I'm going to do is to do the same thing for the contact page. I'll come right here, change this to contacts page view. So this will be contact page, and then this will be a template view as well. Then we shall have this as contact page, and then contact.html. So since contact.html is with a small or with a lowercase c, that's exactly what I'm going to be providing. Yeah. So when I go back, I can then get rid of these pages so that we only remain with our class-based views. So yeah, we've now changed our current views to class-based views. Now, in order for us to register them, we have to follow what we did here. So to register our template view, which is our about page, I can come right here and say about page.as view, and then I'll do the same thing for the contact page. So that's going to be our contact page dot as view, and that will be just enough to mark these two views as class-based views. So if I refresh, everything is working fine. Our contact page, our home page, and our about page are working successfully. So basically that's what we need. Now another thing we can do is to use a list view instead of this home page view, and the way we do that is by basically changing this. So list view is also a generic view that comes with list view. So instead of this being just a view, we can say it is a list view, and then we can come right here and modify this get request or remove it and just have normal stuff. So we can have the page title, which is going to be the variable that we shall then use or change in our context via the get context data method like I've shown. So page title is going to be product list, and then we can define the template name. So the template name for this will be index.html. And then we can define the model. So the model is the model we want to go ahead and get our products from, which is the product page. We can also be in position to define how we're going to show the products in our home page. So the context object name is going to be the name of what we may want to put in our templates as the name of the list we want to loop over. So if I take you back to our index.html, we named our list of products in our context products. So Django will automatically get to create the list from our product class, and then via the context object name, we shall be in position to loop just like we did for this for loop where we say for product in products. So if I come to our views and say for product in, or I'll just say context object name is going to be equal to product. So that's just how you write a view. So if I go back to our home page right here, we now see our product still being returned, and this is done just via writing a class and providing attributes to that class which are already defined. Now that is very interesting, but we can also modify the context just like we did for the about page and the contact page. So in here, I can define a function called get context data. So get context data will return this call to our get context data, which is basically the context dictionary. If you want to get access to that, you can say context is going to be equal to whatever you returned from this call. So if you're wondering what's happening here, we are just calling the parent is get context data dictionary. So I'll advise you go ahead and brush up on your OOP skills. So we are calling the parent get context data, which is basically the get context data method of our list view right here. And then this is returning for us a blank context object, or a context object with some data. We can then modify that by saying context and then whatever I want in here. So I want to add the title. When I go here, I do not see our title being returned. But if I want to provide it, since we defined it as a global attribute to the class, I can access that via page title. And then I have to just simply return the context. So once I've done that, if I go right here and refresh, now I see our products list title right here. Let's also implement a view to get the detail of our products. So that is very straightforward. If we want to get the detail page of our product, we can define a detail view. We can say class product detail. I'm going to be showing you two ways we can do this, but the class-based view is going to be so straightforward. So we can just say product detail and then we write the detail view. So this will be a subclass of that detail view. Now keep in mind these are just classes that are coming from Django. And then in here, all we need to do is to provide the model. So the model for the object is going to be the product, and we can also provide the context object name. So for our case, that will be our product. Once we've done that, then we can also maybe provide the query set. So the query set is like a query that Django will use to determine how it's going to get this product out of the list of products. So we can do something like product dot objects dot all. And yeah, those will be the three attributes we shall add on this product detail view. So once we've done that, then we also have to provide the template on which we want to render our product detail. So I'm going to put that in products/product detail.html, and products is not a dictionary that we actually have yet, so I'm going to have to create it. So when I go to products templates, I have to create the products folder right here. So if I say products, that will be a folder, and then I want to create the product detail.html as the file. So I think I've created the folder with that. So let me just rename the folder. So that's going to be just products, but I think it just had a subfolder, so I'll just delete and recreate it. Sorry for my mistake. So I'll just come right here in products, templates, create a new folder, create a folder, called it products, and then inside products we shall have the products detail, or the product detail .html. So yeah, that's going to be our file. Now I created the UI for this section as bare HTML file outside our project. So I'll pick it up under a folder that I called I think it's my documents. I called it UI snippets and then products.html. So I'll right click on it and then I will open it up with VS Code. So I will copy this UI right here, and then since we want this to have the same layout as the current pages we have, I can extend our layout. So I'll say extend, and then this will be layouts/base.html. So I'll say block. We called our main section main content, and that's exactly where I'm going to put the UI for that template. So of course there are going to be sections I'm not going to be using for now, so I'll remove them. But when I go to our page right here, we currently have no link to our detail page. And the first thing we also need to do is to make sure this is registered in our URLs, because right now all we have is a view class but no URL to access it. So I'll go within our URLs, product URLs, and then I will create a path. Now I have this general extension. I can create an inline path to create something like that. So I can provide my URL as product, and then this is going to be integer. But instead of providing another name, Django class-based views or generic class-based views just require you to provide the primary key of that specific item. So this is what they call a path parameter right here. But it takes in the type of what you want to return in your request, and then that specific parameter you want to pass in there. For example, if you wanted to add a number to our URL, like let's say the primary key of that item, of course we're going to be making use of an integer. In this case, we want to pass the primary key, and then you have to specify the type of that primary key. Then that's going to be the URL. So the view we want to specify here is going to be views dot product detail. So that will be dot as view, and then if we are to provide a name, that's going to be our product name. So let's go ahead and see this in action. I'll format my code right here, and then this is what we shall have. We've defined a class-based view called product detail, and then given it a URL. Now we have a name, product detail. So for us to see that in action, I will go to index.html, and inside index.html is where we shall have the link to our detail. So that's exactly where I'm going to put our URL, and that URL is going to be to the product detail. Now, one thing to note is we need to provide the primary key, because this takes in the primary key as a parameter to our URL. So that's going to be product.id. And once I'm done with that, I'll save, and then I'll refresh. All right, so now that we have our product detail page, we can navigate to our detail section right here. And now we see that our product details.html does not exist. So I don't know what happened there, but let me try to see. I'll see product detail is something that we have here. I think product details. So templates, products, and then product detail, which is supposed to work. I think I have to restart my server for that to work. So let me try to do that and then run the server. When I add the page, still I see it does not exist. I wonder what I may have done wrong. So I'll go back to my templates right here, products, and then did I make a name? or spelling error. So that's product detail, product detail. And then in our templates, let me try to go back to the views. So this is product detail, not product details. Sorry for that. So yeah, when I add that, I have this template right here, which is also a Bootstrap template. Now the review section and this form for creating a review is something I'm going to add in the next video. But for now, let us go ahead and just comment those out. So what I'm going to do is to move back in our template of product detail, and then I will simply grab the HTML that has the review section and the form for adding a review. So I'll start from reviews right here all the way down up to where we have our form. So that's where the content ends. So I'll just highlight these two parts, and then I will use my comment tags. Still, these are found within the VS Code extension. So if you want to code them out, please install the General extension. I'll keep on saying it because it simplifies life when you're working with Django templates. So yeah, now once we've added the comments, or we've commented out that UI, it will disappear, and then we shall add it when we get to the point of adding reviews. And I think I'm also going to comment out this category because we haven't implemented categories yet. So I'm going to come right here, remove this, and then I will add comment, paste that H5. So that's exactly what we shall have. And then we're having a title and a description. So let's go ahead and fill those up based on our context data. So this is going to be through the context object name, which we refer to as product. So I'll just come right here and then change these wireless headphones to something else. So I'll just say product dot name, and then inside here is where I'm also going to add the description for those headsets or those items, and that's exactly where we shall have our product or description. So all these attributes are being picked from the model object or the product. So I'll provide a description right here, and yeah, that will be our description. So if I save, that's going to be the title and the description. One thing you can note here is we do not have the product image, and yet the product image is something important. So I'm going to go ahead and use some Bootstrap right in here to implement a row. So .row is how you create a div with class row. And then I will create two columns. So the first column will have 3 portions out of 12, and then the next one will have 9 out of 12. So that's how you deal with width when implementing this sort of like grid layout in Bootstrap. So the first one is going to contain the image. Now, since we have this in our index.html, I can just get it right here and then paste it at the top. I'll format my document. I'm having some ways I format, but this I think is present within VS Code HTML support. So now I provide the product.image URL. That's the image we see right here, which is our default image. Now, next thing I'm going to do is to paste in the code for the rest of the UI, and then I'll format it with Shift-Alt-F. So let me just right click and save. Going back here, if I go back to our product detail, I think I have two things. I have the image. Oh, I have the image right here, but I can go ahead and add that. So I can add the H1 here, and this H1 is going to have the product name. So I'll say product.name, and maybe I'll just give it the class of card. Let me just check within my, let me see if I have product detail.html. I will go ahead and reopen this in VS Code. This is the file of the UI snippet.